The metal walls of Training Station Omega 7 felt cold under the bright white lights. Hundreds of young beings from different worlds walked through the long hallways, their footsteps echoing in the empty spaces. Today was a day everyone feared, the annual survival test that would push them to their breaking point. Commander Zelfak stood at the front of the main briefing room, his green scales catching the light as he moved. Deep scars ran across his face and arms, each one telling a story of battles fought in the darkness between stars. His yellow eyes swept across the room, studying each cadet carefully. After 30 years of training young soldiers, he could spot the weak ones within minutes. The room buzzed with quiet anxiety as representatives from 12 different species filled the metal chairs. Each group prepared for the coming terror in their own way, following traditions passed down through generations of their people. In the front rows, the Kethmari sat like living glass statues. Their see-through bodies glowed softly as they began their ancient breathing rituals. Their long, thin fingers traced patterns in the air while they hummed low notes that seemed to vibrate through the floor. These ethereal beings had perfected the art of staying calm through meditation over thousands of years. Behind them, the Zephyrians clicked and chirped each other in rapid bursts. Their insect-like bodies moved in perfect rhythm as they synchronized their wing beats. The sound filled the room like a strange mechanical orchestra. When stressed, these bug-like creatures found comfort in group harmony, their individual fears dissolving into collective strength. Near the middle of the room, the Merdan sat in special water-filled chairs that kept their blue-green skin moist. Their webbed hands moved over small devices attached to their necks, emergency sedation units that would flood their systems with calming chemicals if panic set in. These fish-like beings had evolved in the peaceful depths of their ocean world, where sudden dangers were rare. The Quillians, small furry creatures with large black eyes, huddled together in tight groups. Their soft, squeaking voices whispered prayers, while their tiny hands clutched stress relief devices. Some had already activated mild sedatives, their pupils dilated and movements slow. Crystalline beings called Vextari sat motionless, their rock-like bodies resonating with low-frequency vibrations. These living minerals could enter a trance-like state that would protect their consciousness if terror became too much to bear. But in the back row, 3 human cadets sat completely still and relaxed. Taemin was built like someone who had spent years working with his hands. His thick fingers, marked with small scars from countless repairs, moved steadily across his tablet as he wrote down every detail about the station's equipment. His dark hair was cut short in military style, and his brown eyes focused intensely on technical information that others ignored. Ji-Woo sat beside him with perfect posture, her slim frame hiding the strength that came from years of training. Her long black hair was pulled back in a tight bun, not a strand out of place. While other cadets worried about survival, she methodically checked each tool in her kit, testing connections and battery levels with the precision of a master craftsman. The third human, Hyunsik, appeared completely at ease. He leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, a small smile playing on his lips as he watched the alien species prepare for psychological warfare. His casual attitude seemed almost disrespectful, but his alert eyes missed nothing. Where others saw terrifying scenarios, he saw interesting problems waiting to be solved. Commander Zelfak's voice boomed across the room, cutting through the nervous chatter and ritual preparations. Today's exercise simulates catastrophic station failure in deep space, hull breaches, life support failures, dwindling resources, and communication blackouts. You will face scenarios designed to test your psychological limits under extreme duress. The alien cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some began breathing faster. Others activated additional calming protocols. The Trilaxian songbirds started humming stress relief melodies, their beautiful voices creating an otherworldly chorus that echoed off the metal walls. The simulation will push you beyond normal operational parameters, Zelfak continued, his scarred face showing no emotion. Previous survival rates hover around 40% completion. Many cadets request emergency extraction before the exercise concludes. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a recognition of natural psychological limits. Murmurs of fear rippled through the assembled beings. Several Quillians were now visibly trembling, while some Merdan had increased their sedation levels. Even the normally calm Kethmari showed signs of stress, their translucent forms flickering with unstable energy. The goal is not to break you, but to show you where your breaking point lies. Understanding your limits is crucial for deep space operations where help may be days or weeks away. Are there any questions before we begin? The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems and the nervous breathing of hundreds of terrified cadets. For 30 years, this moment had always been the same. Complete silence as young beings contemplated their upcoming psychological torture. Then Jiwoo raised her hand. What's the power output of the backup generators? And do we have access to the maintenance tunnels? Commander Zelthak blinked slowly, his yellow eyes focusing on the human female with surprise. In 3 decades of conducting these briefings, no cadet had ever asked about technical specifications. They asked about medical support, emergency extraction procedures, or psychological counseling services. Never about power outputs and maintenance access. The alien cadets turned to stare at the humans with confusion and growing curiosity, while they prepared their minds for terror. These strange beings from the death world called Earth were already thinking about solutions. The sharp sound of alarms cut through the air like knives. Red lights flashed on and off, turning the white walls of the station into a blood-colored nightmare. The emergency siren screamed so loud that some cadets covered their ears and curled up on the floor. Then the computer's voice began speaking in its terrible calm tone, as if nothing was wrong at all. Hull breach detected in Section 7. Oxygen levels at 60% and falling. Gravity generators operating at minimum capacity. All personnel report to emergency stations. The words hit the alien cadets like physical blows. This was it. The nightmare had begun. Within minutes, the carefully planned survival methods of the different species started falling apart like old paper in rain. The crystalline Vextari, who looked like walking rocks made of colored glass, quickly formed their traditional prayer circle in the middle of the main corridor. Their bodies began making deep humming sounds that grew louder and more desperate with each passing second. The beautiful music they usually created became harsh noise filled with fear. 2 small Quillian cadets, who looked like fuzzy teddy bears with big black eyes, could not stop shaking. Even though they had taken strong calming drugs before the drill started, their little bodies trembled like leaves in a storm. Their tiny hands fumbled for the emergency buttons on their belts, the panic buttons that would end the exercise and bring rescue teams. One of them pressed his button after only 20 minutes, tears streaming down his furry face. The Trilaxian songbirds, whose voices could create the most beautiful music in the galaxy, tried to sing their traditional harmony songs that were supposed to keep them calm. But fear had crept into their throats like poison. Their lovely voices cracked and broke, turning their peaceful songs into horrible wailing sounds that echoed to the metal corridors like the cries of dying animals. Even the Mare Dan, who were known for staying cool under pressure, began to panic. These blue-green fish-like beings started releasing clouds of chemical signals into their breathing masks, pheromones that showed extreme fear and distress. The smell filled their section of the station with the scent of terror itself. The Kethmari, who looked like people made of clear glass, tried to continue their meditation practices, but their usually steady bodies began flickering like broken lights. Their see-through forms became cloudy and unstable as fear disrupted their mental focus. In one corner, a group of insect-like Zephyrians had stopped their rhythmic wing beating. Instead, they clicked their mandibles rapidly in a pattern that meant danger, danger, danger in their language. Some of them had curled up into tight balls, trying to protect themselves from threats they could not see or fight. But while chaos consumed the alien cadets, the 3 humans moved with purpose and speed. Tae-min had immediately left the main group and headed straight for the engineering sections. He moved through the corridors like he had lived on the station his whole life, taking shortcuts through maintenance areas that most people did not even know existed. When he reached the primary life support room, he did not hesitate or look around in fear. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and dove headfirst into the complex machinery. His thick hands, marked with scars from years of repair work, moved through the tangled wires and pipes with the skill of a master craftsman. Sparks flew as he rerouted power connections, but he did not flinch or pull away. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he worked, but his breathing stayed calm and steady. To him, this was just another broken machine that needed fixing. Oxygen recycling is stable if we seal off sections 12 through 15. His voice came to the communication system, as calm as if he was discussing the weather. Ji-Woo, can you handle the water reclamation? Ji-Woo had found her way to the deepest parts of the station, areas that most people would find scary and confusing. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, and the sound of failing machinery echoed all around her. But she moved through the maze of pipes and tanks like she was walking through her own home. She had already located the water processing systems and was pulling apart control panels with quick, confident movements. Her slim fingers worked through complex wiring while she mentally calculated flow rates and pressure levels. When she found spare filtration units in a storage closet, she smiled like someone who had just found treasure. Already on it, she called back to Min, her voice cheerful despite being surrounded by failing equipment. Found some spare filtration units in storage. Give me 20 minutes. While his two companions handled the technical problems, Hyun-sik had taken on a completely different job. He walked calmly through the areas where alien cadets were panicking, carrying a clipboard he had found somewhere. Instead of running from the chaos, he walked straight into it. He moved from group to group, writing down information about available supplies and resources, while others screamed or cried around him. When he found a storage room filled with emergency rations, he carefully counted every package. When he discovered a medical kit, he checked its contents and marked them on his list. Has anyone seen the emergency blankets? He asked a group of trembling Quillians, as if the red flashing lights and screaming alarms were just minor distractions. Also, does anyone know how to operate those heating units? We might need them if the temperature drops. The small furry beings could only stare at him in amazement, their big eyes wide with confusion and growing hope. 3 hours into the drill, something had gone terribly wrong. What Commander Zelthak did not know was that real problems were happening alongside the fake ones. Hidden deep in the station's machinery, actual systems were breaking down. Pipes were cracking, wires were sparking, and safety controls were failing for real. The pretend emergency had become a real emergency, but nobody in charge had noticed yet. The alien cadets were completely broken. Even the strongest and bravest species had given up hope and stopped trying to survive. The Kefmari, who looked like people made of clear glass, had gone into a deep trance so complete that their bodies became almost invisible. They sat perfectly still, their minds locked away in a place where the terror could not reach them. Several small Quillian cadets had collapsed on the floor, unconscious from pure fear. Their tiny hearts, no bigger than a human thumb, had been beating so fast for so long that their bodies simply shut down to protect them. Other Quillians stood over their fallen friends, making small crying sounds that broke the hearts of anyone who heard them. The beautiful Trilaxian songbirds had stopped making any sound at all. Their voices, which could create music that made people weep with joy, were now silent. They huddled together with their colorful feathers dull and lifeless, like flowers that had been left too long without water. Even the Tupetarian cadets, who were built like walking mountains and came from a world of constant storms, sat in corners breathing too fast and staring at nothing. These massive beings, who could lift tons of weight with their bare hands, were paralyzed by fear they had never experienced before. But while the alien students fell apart around them, the three humans seemed to be getting more energetic and focused with each passing hour. Tae-min had created something that should not have been possible. Using pieces from the air recycling system, parts from the water purifier, and components from the waste disposal unit, he had built a new machine that could process the station's atmosphere better than the original equipment. The strange device hummed and clicked as it worked, held together with welding metal and emergency repair tape. As he connected the final wires, he hummed a cheerful tune that sounded like something people might sing at a party. Sweat ran down his face and soaked his shirt, but his hands stayed perfectly steady as he welded connections that no engineering manual said would work. "This is actually pretty straightforward," he said over the communication system, his voice as relaxed as someone fixing a broken bicycle. "Remember that typhoon last year that hit Seoul? This is like that, but with less mud and flying debris." The alien cadets who could still think clearly stared at their screens in amazement. How could he compare this life-threatening situation to weather back on his home planet? And how could he sound so calm while doing impossible repairs? Jiwoo had not only fixed the water recycling system, but had made it work 30% better than when it was new. She had found ways to clean and reuse water that the original designers had never thought of. Now she had moved on to organizing all the food supplies in the station, working with the speed and accuracy of a supercomputer. She sorted through thousands of meal packages, energy bars, vitamin tablets, and emergency rations. Each package got a neat label showing what species could eat it safely and how many calories it contained. She arranged everything in perfect rows and made detailed lists of exactly what they had. If we assume a 14-day scenario and account for the metabolic differences between species, we can stretch these rations for 3 weeks, she reported over the radio, her voice bright and cheerful as if she was planning a picnic instead of rationing food for a survival situation, though the Trilaxians might need to supplement with those nutrient gels they brought. Their fast metabolism burns through calories pretty quickly. While his friends handled the technical problems, Hyunsik had become something like a counselor and coordinator for the alien cadets who could still function. He moved through the groups of frightened beings with endless patience, somehow managing to get them to help with small tasks instead of just sitting and being scared. His calm attitude was like a medicine that spread to others. When he spoke to panicked aliens, they found themselves breathing slower and thinking clearer. But his suggestions often left them speechless with confusion. "Why don't you help Tae-min with the heavy lifting?" he asked a massive Brittarian cadet who was sitting in a corner breathing too fast, his huge chest rising and falling like a broken bellows. The mountain size being looked up with eyes full of terror. "The artificial gravity is fluctuating, so it's actually easier to move things around now," Hyunsik continued with a friendly smile. "Think of it as a game. You know how children on your world play in the low-gravity zones during storm season? It's just like that." The Brittarian blinked slowly, his massive head tilting as he tried to process this strange human's words. How could anyone think of this nightmare as a game? But something about the human's confident tone made the idea seem almost reasonable. I could try," the giant alien said hesitantly, his voice like distant thunder. "That's the spirit," Hyunsik said, making a mark on his clipboard. "Just remember to push gently when the gravity dips. We don't want anything flying into the walls too hard." As he walked away to help other cadets, the Brittarian slowly stood up, his fear beginning to fade into cautious curiosity. High above the chaos, Commander Zelfak stood behind thick glass windows in the observation room, watching everything unfold below. His yellow eyes moved from screen to screen, studying the readouts that monitored every cadet's body and mind during the drill. What he saw made no sense at all. The computer screen showed lines and numbers that tracked heart rate, brain activity, stress hormones, and psychological state for each species. For the alien cadets, these readings painted a clear picture of terror. Red warning lights blinked next to dozens of names as stress levels climbed into dangerous territory. Some readings were so high that medical teams were standing by with emergency equipment. The Quillian cadets showed heart rates that had doubled or tripled their normal speed. The Keth Mari displayed brain patterns that indicated complete psychological shutdown. Even the tough Brittarian cadets registered stress levels that would normally require immediate medical attention. But the 3 human readouts made Commander Zelfak question whether his monitoring equipment was broken. Not only were the human stress levels manageable, they seemed to be getting lower as the situation got worse. Taemin's heart rate had actually slowed down from when the drill started, settling into the steady rhythm of someone doing familiar work. Jiwoo's brain patterns showed the focus intensity of deep problem-solving, the same type of activity doctors saw in chess masters during important matches. Most strange of all, their cortisol levels, the hormone that rises when people feel scared or threatened, were actually lower than they had been during the peaceful briefing session. It was as if the emergency had made them more relaxed, not less. "This cannot be right," Zelfak muttered, tapping the screen with one clawed finger. "Run diagnostics on the human monitoring systems." His aide, a young Vorthak with bright green scales, worked quickly at a control panel. "All systems functioning normally, sir. The readings are accurate." A new alarm began blaring. different from the drill warnings. This one had a sharp, urgent tone that made everyone in the observation room freeze. The aide's scales turned pale as he read the incoming data. "Sir," the young Vortak whispered, his voice shaking, "we have a problem. The backup systems are experiencing genuine failures. The main power core has developed microfractures. The atmospheric processors are running critical. This is no longer a simulation." Commander Zelthak felt his blood turn to ice water. A real emergency was happening during a fake emergency, and most of his cadets were too scared to function. Half of them were unconscious. The others were paralyzed with fear, and the station was actually starting to fall apart around them. But as he looked down at the humans through the observation windows, something amazing happened. They simply kept working. Tae-min was floating through a corridor where the artificial gravity had completely failed, using handholds on the walls to pull himself along. When a new alarm started ringing, one that indicated actual structural damage to the station's hull, he paused to listen for a moment, then casually pushed off the wall to float toward the sound. "Oh, looks like we got actual structural damage now," he said into his communication device, his voice carrying the same tone someone might use to comment on interesting weather. "Ji-woo, want to help me with some emergency welding? This is getting interesting." From somewhere deep in the station's engineering section, Ji-woo's voice came back over the radio. She sounded almost excited, like someone who had just discovered a fun new puzzle to solve. "On my way," she replied cheerfully. "Should I bring the plasma torch or the molecular fuser? I found both in the emergency tool storage." "Both. And grab some of those emergency patches while you're at it." Tae-min answered as he pulled himself through the zero-gravity corridor toward the site of real damage. "This might get tricky, but I think we can handle it." Commander Zelthak watched this exchange with growing amazement. These humans had just learned that their lives were in actual danger, not pretend danger, and their response was to get more excited about the work they were doing. Meanwhile, Hyun-sik had accomplished something that seasoned officers would have found difficult. He had somehow convinced a group of Merdan cadets, the fish-like beings who had been releasing panic chemicals into the air just hours before, to help with organizing the evacuation of the most traumatized aliens. The blue-green beings moved carefully through the corridors, their webbed hands gentle as they helped carry unconscious Quillians to safer areas of the station. They followed Hyun-sik's calm instructions without question, treating his suggestions as if they came from a senior officer instead of fellow cadet. "Let's move the Keth Mari to the meditation room," Hyun-sik suggested to the group, his voice steady and confident. "The acoustic dampening there will help them recover from their trance state. And we should set up the emergency medical station in the main corridor, more space for the medical teams to work when they arrive." He moved through the chaos with the calm confidence of someone organizing a community event rather than managing a life-threatening emergency. When sparks flew from damaged electrical systems, he simply walked around them. When new alarms started ringing, he made notes on his clipboard and continued with his work. Commander Zelthak turned to his aide with confusion and growing respect in his eyes. "How are they doing this? Every psychological model we have says this should be impossible. Beings cannot become calmer when danger increases." The young aide studied his instruments with wide eyes. "I don't know, sir, but their vital signs suggest they are treating this real emergency exactly the same way they treated the simulated one, as if there is no difference between fake danger and real danger in their minds." Through the observation windows, the sound of welding equipment echoed through the station as the humans began repairing actual damage to their temporary home in space. 3 days had passed since the emergency ended. Rescue ships had arrived to fix the station completely, and all the cadets were safe. But Commander Zelthak sat alone in his quiet office, staring at papers and computer screens that told a story he could barely believe. The thick report in front of him contained numbers and facts that made no sense according to everything he had learned in 30 years of military service. He read the same pages over and over, but the information never changed, never became easier to understand. The survival drill had been created using decades of careful research. Scientists had studied hundreds of different species to learn exactly how much fear and stress each type of being could handle before their minds broke down. The test was designed to be hard but not impossible. It would push cadets to their limits without causing permanent damage to their sanity. Every detail had been planned based on solid scientific knowledge about how civilized species reacted to danger. The fake emergencies were calibrated to create just enough stress to test psychological strength without destroying it completely. But the humans had destroyed every assumption that the test was built on. Zelthak turned to another section of his files, the Planetary Classification Database. Here, the galaxy scientists kept detailed records of every world and the creatures that lived there. Most planets were rated as Class I through Class V, meaning they were safe, stable places where intelligent life could develop peacefully. A few dangerous worlds earned Class 6 through Class 8 ratings, indicating places with harsh weather, dangerous animals, or unstable environments. These planets produced species that were tougher and more alert than average, but still followed normal psychological patterns when faced with extreme stress. Then there were the rare Class 9 through Class 11 worlds, the places so dangerous that most species avoided them completely. Only the hardest, most adaptable forms of life could survive on planets where everything tried to kill everything else. Earth carried a Class XI rating. Zelthak had never seen a Class XI world before. The classification meant a planet where catastrophic events happened so often that survival required constant adaptation to life-threatening conditions. The computer files described a world that sounded like a nightmare designed by an evil god. The weather on Earth could kill without warning. Massive storms with winds that could destroy buildings appeared regularly. Water fell from the sky in such quantities that entire cities disappeared under floods. In winter, the temperature dropped so low that exposed skin died in minutes. In summer, the heat could cook a person alive in just hours. The ground itself was unstable and dangerous. The planet's surface was broken into giant pieces that moved and crashed into each other, creating earthquakes that leveled mountains and opened deep cracks that swallowed forests. Volcanoes exploded without warning, covering vast areas with deadly hot rock and poisonous gases. The animals that lived on Earth were like nothing found on other worlds. Massive predators with teeth the size of swords had hunted in packs. Tiny creatures carried diseases that could kill millions. Even the plants were dangerous. Some could poison you if you touched them. Others would grab and eat any animal that came too close. Resources on Earth were scarce and hard to get. Clean water was not available everywhere. Food had to be hunted, gathered, or grown with great effort. Safe shelter required constant building and repair. Every single day was a battle against a world that seemed designed to kill its inhabitants. But the most remarkable entry in the file was a simple note that had been added by researchers. Inhabitants show no elevated stress response to environmental threats. Appear to have evolved psychological mechanisms that treat catastrophic events as normal operational parameters. This was the key that explained everything Zelthak had witnessed. The 3 Korean cadets had not been unusually brave or heroic. They had simply approached the crisis the way their entire species approached everything, with the calm assumption that disaster was inevitable and that the proper response was to start fixing problems immediately. On Earth, emergencies were not special events that required panic and fear. They were Tuesday afternoon. Hurricane coming? Board up the windows and wait it out. Earthquake shaking the building? Get under a sturdy table and assess the damage afterward. Flood? Washing away the bridge? Find another route and start building a new bridge. For humans, catastrophe was not the exception, it was the rule. Their brains had evolved to treat life-threatening situations as normal work that needed to be done, like washing dishes or fixing a broken door. Zelthak read through the individual reports the human cadets had submitted about their experience. Even these short documents revealed the fundamental difference between human and alien psychology. Taemin's report was written like someone describing routine maintenance work. Standard emergency response procedures. Situation comparable to seasonal flooding in Seoul or earthquake preparedness drills during college. Recommend better redundancy in life support systems for future exercises. Also suggest having more welding equipment available. Current supplies were barely adequate. Ji-woo had focused entirely on technical improvements. Water recycling efficiency could be increased by 37% with minor modifications to filtration systems. Food distribution protocols need revision to account for different species' dietary requirements. Emergency tool storage should be reorganized for faster access during crisis situations. Hyun-sik's report read like an event coordinator's notes. Alien species showed significant improvement in cooperation when given simple, concrete tasks. Recommend cross-species training exercises to build confidence. Also suggest better communication systems. Current radios had too much static during the emergency. None of them mentioned being scared. None of them described the situation as terrifying or dangerous. They wrote about the life-threatening emergency the same way other people might write about a busy day at work. Commander Zelthak closed the files and leaned back in his chair, finally understanding what he had witnessed. These humans came from a world so hostile that their species had evolved beyond fear itself. The end.